Hello, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my FantraXpert web application. I've written an article about it, but I thought I'd create a video as well to demonstrate the app being used. This is mainly because the app, unfortunately, is not going to be made available at this point to the general public, and that's not because I'm being mean, it's just because a lot of the pages on the app, a lot of the data that's actually visualized in the app just isn't relevant at all to the average user. It specifically pertains to the Fantrax League that me and my friends play in. With that being said, let's take a look at some of the pages in the app. So we've got this little navigation bar at the top, which is accessible on all pages, and then this is the home page. So we'll click on the ownership page first. So this page is all about ownership periods. So you can see we have this aggregate view and this detailed view. The detailed view shows individual ownership periods. So for example, I owned Ryan Cherky from the 29th of October to, well, never, because I still own him. I owned him for 3 days inclusive. And then you can also filter and you can say, let's have a look at Ryan Cherky. I am the only user who's ever owned Ryan Cherky. I've owned him 4 times this season, actually drafted him and then dropped him and then picked him up again, dropped him, picked him up again, dropped him, picked him up again. In all of that time, all of the periods of time I've owned him, so if you can see 55 days in total, he's only ever played a single game for me and he only scored 4.5 points. So it's definitely not potential there, but not much. It's not provided much benefit to me so far. This aggregate view is cool because it basically sums together all of the ownership periods for a particular player and a particular user. So you can see that the player that's been owned by a single user for the longest period of time is Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he's been owned by me for 1,319 days, which is by far and away the longest. I always pick up Trent Alexander-Arnold, or I did until he left and joined Real Madrid, which has left me bereft. You can see 2020-21, I drafted him. In 2021-22, Nathan drafted him, but then I traded for him like 7 days later. 2022-23, I drafted him. 2023-24, I drafted him. In 24-25, I drafted him. So yeah, I've always been a big Trent Alexander-Arnold fan, and this year was the first year in a long time where I haven't actually been able to either draft him or immediately steal him from somebody else. Yeah, so it's a cool page. Draft grid. This is a completely different page. This shows a visualization of the draft results. So we do a draft in our league where we basically take it in turns to select players, and it's called a snake draft. So it goes Salah, Palmer, Saka, Fernandez, Haaland, Wirtz, Isak, and then Bowen. So Nathan would have got the 7th and the 8th pick in this draft, just to make it a little bit more fair. So this is based off the draft grid you can see on the actual Fantrax website. So that was the inspiration for it. But the cool thing about this, aside from the fact you can easily switch between different drafts and redrafts and stuff like that, is that you can change the display metric. So position is the default, that's what you see on the Fantrax website, but you can also go to, for example, points, and you can see easily who did a good draft and who didn't. So Semenyo obviously stands out in round 4 from Alex. Haaland obviously is currently the best player in the game. Nathan had a couple of clankers. You can see Isak in round 1, who unfortunately is now on my team because I traded for him. And then Jeremy Frimpong in round 3, who is actually the first player to the earliest pick to end up on the waivers this season, which you'll see in a sec. In the later rounds, Nick Pope seems to be quite a solid pick from Johnny. And then Jack Grealish from Alex in round 13 is another good one, as well as Reece James from Ian. If we look at method out, we can see, there we go, Frimpong from Nathan is the earliest pick this draft to be dropped down to the waivers. You can see I've basically traded away or wavered my entire team apart from Rice, although I have actually reclaimed a few of those players. So Foden is back on my team now, Iwobi is back on my team, Cherky is back on my team, Trafford is blah blah blah. But yeah, it's a nice little way of looking at the data. Actually, let's go back to a previous draft and look at points. This was the 2024-25 season. See, I went for Christopher Nkunku in round 3. I did that 2 seasons running, actually. It was a really poor decision. And I was quite unlucky because my round 4 pick, Rodri, ended up, I think he did an ACL injury quite early in the season, and he was out for the entire season, so obviously didn't help me. one of the reasons I actually ended up finishing last in our league last year. If I had to make an excuse, then yeah, not great. Draft analysis is so draft grid is a cool way of visualizing draft results, but draft analysis is like my attempt to actually say, statistically speaking, was a particular draft pick a good draft pick or a bad draft pick? Was a particular draft by a user, was that a good draft performance or a bad draft performance? And the way we calculate this is using this metric called expected points. So expected points, you can see, we basically look at the overall position, the average number of points scored over the course of a season by players picked in that overall position. So, for example, if for players picked in like round 7, but maybe like pick number 40 or something, maybe the overall average over time. I don't think I'm explaining this very well. But anyway, you can see that the best draft performance of all time, according to this, the outperformance metrics are looking at the actual points scored over the course of a season versus the expected points scored, was Jed in 2023-24. By quite a big distance, actually. That's a huge points jump and a lot higher than second place. So if we actually look at the components of that draft, so the individual picks within the draft, I should say, you can see for Jed, Anthony Gordon was the best pick. He was picked in round 16, so the last round of the draft. Only expected to score 167 points according to this metric, ended up scoring 462 points, which made him the 10th ranked player in the entire game, and he was picked in the last round. So obviously an outstanding pick. Bruno Guimaraes, overall pick 66, but ended up being the 11th best player in the game. Saka, picked first, ended up being the best player in the game, but performed really, really well. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Players. Okay, so this page is the first page that we've seen that's actually kind of useful from a strategic perspective, because the other pages are just kind of informational, but they're not really going to help me make any decisions. This one might, when I go to the waivers and I want to see like how players have been performing over time, this is where I might go to. So you can change the dates, so we can look at the 2024-25 season. Mohamed Salah was top scoring player. We can sort by different metrics, so we can sort by points per start. Romain Essa was the highest player according to points per start. He only started one game. You can actually filter to increase that, but we won't bother with that now. 2023-24 season, if we look at the points, you can see Bukayo Saka was the best player. But the cool thing is you can choose dynamic date ranges, so you can use this date slider to sort of select any date range you want. So this is the all-time since 2018-19 season, which is when I started collecting this Fantrax data, because it's when we moved to the Fantrax platform. You can see Mohamed Salah is by far and away the best player, 3,957 points. Second place is Trent Alexander-Arnold with 3,045. What I like about this page, well, there's many things I like about it, but it's got this special feature, this checkbox on the left, which looks fairly discreet. If you click it, you can see it gives a visualization of player performance over time. This window, 10 games, is basically this rolling average. So if I set it to 1, that basically shows every single game individually, and it's not particularly helpful because it's so spiky. So 10 is the default, but maybe half a season could be a good way of visualizing it, and you can see, his performance, Salah's performance has dropped off a cliff. But you can also compare him to other players, so Bruno Fernandes, for example. A lot more consistent. What about Bukayo Saka? So Saka's an interesting one because you can just see he's kind of getting better and better. So yeah, it's a cool way of comparing players. You can also remove all the players, and then we can maybe have a look at someone like Declan Rice. Maybe we want to compare him to Bruno Guimaraes. And maybe we'll increase the window because we know these players have both played lots of games. Interestingly similar. I actually thought Declan Rice would be a little bit further away from Guimaraes, but yeah, I've got both of them, so that's good this season. And yeah, you can see we've got different filters on this page. We've got this thing called perspective date. But yeah, this page is a pretty cool way of visualizing player performance quite easily. Head-to-head matrix. This is pretty simple. It didn't take very long to create. It just shows how users have performed against other users over time. Anything interesting from here? I guess the fact that Nathan has a positive record or a neutral record against everyone except for Johnny, where he just gets absolutely battered, is kind of interesting. Standings. So this shows the current league table in our Fantrax league. Alex is top, as he always is. I am currently in 5th place. A team name, This Is For You, Jasper. I chose that name because I thought it would be quite funny if, well, I obviously don't want to lose, but if I did lose, I thought it would be a little bit amusing. Just my sense of humour. But yeah, it should, in theory, inspire me to perform better. It's not really doing that at the moment. Last season, we can see I finished bottom, but it was so close. I actually finished on the exact same number of points as Jed. He just beat me on this metric, fantasy F points or Fantrax points or whatever. The annoying thing was, if you look at game week 34, I was actually 2 wins ahead of Jed. And he managed to win the last 4 games of the season to pip me at the post, which was very, very, very annoying. He was delighted about that. Cool. Anyway, so we've also got this all-time toggle at the top. If you switch to all-time, you can see the all-time standings, and Elliot is at the top. I know it looks kind of weird initially because you're like, he's only got 153 points, but the table is ordered by number of medals because it's silverware that counts ultimately, isn't it? And when you include the seasons we played on Togger, Elliot actually has won 3 championships. He's won bronze medal once, and he's won the wooden spoon once. Alex will probably win the league this season, and that's going to make him the best player of all time. He's won the league twice already, 4 silver medals. Ian is an interesting case because he has never come in the top 2, and he's also never won the wooden spoon. He's come 3rd 5 times every single season. He's just always in the middle of the table. And then Guy Meager is at the bottom. He basically played in one of the Togger seasons and then never again. He's most famous for trading away Coutinho. I think he might have just dropped Coutinho actually. I think he said something like, "I just want to see what my team looks like without him in it." But Coutinho at that point was one of the best players in the game, so it was an odd decision. But he's left the league. Matchups. This by default shows the biggest wins of all time. So you can see biggest win of all time is technically my win over Ian in the 2022-23 season, game week 25. You click that and you can see what your player scored, and you've also got a link to view it on Fantrax, which is cool. So you can actually verify that the data is correct. Well, you can actually see this is 182.75 and this is 183, and I've made a note there. I don't know exactly what's the cause of that. I think the data somehow can change over time, but it's a bit annoying. I know it's not a very good excuse, but so you can also, if you want, for example, to remove any invalid scores, because obviously Ian didn't actually score 0 that week. I think he was playing an invalid team, wasn't he? What's it say? In illegal roster. So he did that a few times that season. You can see here he did it, and he did it here. So it obviously kind of skews the data a little bit. So we can exclude the invalids, which is basically any matchup where one of the players scored 0 points. And then you have the biggest win of all time being Johnny's win over Nathan, 232 to 90. An absolute thrashing. And yeah, looks like Trent 46 points, Van Dijk 40 points. That's absolutely ridiculous. But you can also switch and you can look at individual matchup scores. So the highest individual matchup score belongs to Nathan Gore, 2023-24, game week 34. What I find interesting here is he beat Alex this week, who scored 236.75 points, which is actually the 4th highest score of all time. So it seems incredibly unfortunate to lose that game from Alex's perspective. Yeah. Obviously, most of the highest scores of all time result in wins, but they also take place in double game weeks as well. So I suppose that you do get the occasional loss because both players tend to score quite a bit more highly in double game weeks. You can exclude double game weeks. The filter takes a while to work, but it will work. And you can see the highest ever score in a non-double game week. Well, it was like Johnny score that we saw, the highest ever win margin, 232 points. So only three users, I should say, have scored more than 200 points in a single game week. Alex, actually, really recently, I think it was last game week, actually, 2025-26 season, game week 8, 192.5 points. So, yeah, very impressive. Although, when you look at the players who scored all the points for Mukiele and Mateta, it's probably more luck than judgment. But anyway, who scored? So this page doesn't actually work on the FantraXpert website, and that's basically because of Cloudflare blocking data center IPs. So the WhoScored website has this Cloudflare protection, and it's able to recognize when requests are being made from IPs associated that are based in data centers, such as the digital. So this web server that I'm serving this on is a DigitalOcean. It's a DigitalOcean web server, so I guess it's in some data center somewhere. And anyway, it's blocked. But that's why I've got it open in my local machine, so we can have a look at it working, because it is a really cool page, and it's another page that I think is really useful for working out if a player is going to be good who's coming to the league for the first time. So, for example, before this season, we can have a look at Ryan Cherky and how he performed in the 2024-25 season. And the search doesn't work. Okay. Maybe it's not working locally either. That's interesting. Maybe WhoScored have actually just made it more difficult to access their data more generally. This was working the other day. Anyway, the idea would basically be that I type in a player's name and a season, and I click search, and it basically scrapes the data from the WhoScored page and looks at all the different metrics, and then looks at the values associated with those metrics from our database, and then works out how many points per game that player would have scored in that season, and then creates like a little panel on the page that you can have a look at. And it's just a nice way of like quickly seeing how players have performed outside of the Premier League in any given season. Unfortunately, not working. I'm gonna have to look into that. This page, EPL table, is yet not super interesting. Just literally is the Premier League table. Liverpool sadly in 7th place there. Appearances is quite cool. It's basically all of the metrics that are recorded in Fantrax. So like goals, assists, clean sheets, key passes, penalty kicks drawn, shots on target, etc., etc., etc. And you can just basically see individual players and how they've done. So we can filter, and we can say, for example, Kai Havertz, and it will load automatically because we've got this auto load toggle on. And you can see his most recent game was on the 17th of August, 1.75 points in a 29-minute performance. He was owned by me at the time. You can also filter, so look at like any game where they played more than 45 minutes. So you can see he scored in his last game where he played more than 45 minutes. That was back in February against Man City. So if we take away these filters and remove that, we can also see things like who scored the most goals in a game. And the answer is a few players: Palmer, Son, Jesus, Antonio, Haaland, De Bruyne, and Palmer. Again, all scored 4 goals in a single game. What if we sort by points? Does take a little while. Jesus is actually the player who scored the most points in a single game with 62, followed by Antonio. There we go. There's good old Trent. Wasn't even owned by me at the time though. Huh. You can also see things like who's made the most key passes in a game. This data is cool because you wouldn't normally be able to see this. This is obviously not just relevant to our Fantrax league. it's just generally interesting to people who like football data. But obviously, you can't get this sort of data on like who scored. You can't see, for example, who's done the most key passes in a game since the 2018-19 season. That's all kind of Opta data that who scored use, but that the general public don't have access to. So it's quite cool that I've been able to kind of scrape all that and then make that available, at least to myself. I might make this page, the appearances page, available at some point. Maybe the players page to the general public because they are kind of generally quite interesting. Here we go. Bruno Fernandes, 10 key passes in a single game. Same with De Bruyne and Pascal Gross. This one's interesting. Contest succeeded. I've already played around with this before, so I know who the top player is in terms of contest succeeded in a single game, and it's very much as you would expect, as you'll see. Adama Traore, and he was owned by me at the time. What a beautiful thing. 16 contests succeeded in a single game. You can see Jeremy Doku, Alan Saint-Maximin, Mohamed Kudus as well, and then Adama Traore. So all players that you'd expect to make lots of dribbles. Anyway, you can spend a lot of time looking at data on this page, and potentially it could be used for decision making. Probably not as useful as like the players page because you're not aggregating data over time, but I don't know. It's really cool. This is a cool page as well, actually. The waiver scatter page. So it looks a little bit scary when you first open it up, but basically what it's doing is showing you um, a, a graph which shows the points scored in games before someone was picked up, before a waiver, and the points scored in games after someone was picked up. So, for example, James Maddison, he scored 28 points in the 5 games before I claimed him from the waivers on the 26th of November 2021. And then in the 5 games after that, he scored 120 points. So that makes him obviously a very good waiver and classifies him as a gem because he wasn't so good before and then he was very good after. And then you have players like Rafinha. So he was basically good before and good after. So still a very good pickup, but maybe not as kind of inspired as someone like Madison or Doherty. And then you got bad picks like like Max Kilman from Alex, 16th of February 2022. Scored 59 points in the 5 games before Alex picked him up. And then in the 5 games that presumably Wolves played, he played 4 times and only scored 1.5 points. So yeah, not great. So that would categorize him as a trap. Um, you can filter to different seasons. So 2024-25 season, you can see Clivert stands out. Murphy stands out. Both of them Alex picks. You can change. I can't. I won't go into detail what all the different filters do, but yeah, this toggle here, you change it and you go to waivers out, and then you can see the biggest blunders. So, for example, Justin Clivert was the biggest blunder in the 2024-25 season, dropped by Jamie. So why was that a blunder? He scored 98.5 points in the games before, and then 68.75 points in the games after. So he was basically doing really well, and then Jamie dropped him for some reason, and then he continued to do really well. I don't know what Jamie was thinking there. Slips are where a player um, wasn't doing so well and then started doing well after the user dropped them. So this is Murphy is an example of that. So he wasn't doing so well for Nathan, and then as soon as he was freed from Nathan's clutches, he actually started performing. So 87 points in the 5 games after Nathan got rid. I don't know. It's a nice way of visualizing waiver success, and similar to the draft grid and the draft analysis pages, we've got like one sort of very visual view, and then we've got this like statistical comparison. In this case, this is a statistical comparison of waiver performance. So I'm not convinced that the performance metrics used here like accurately say whether or not a user has made good waivers, but it's still interesting to look at. You can see that the SAP Madison pick that we looked at in the waiver scatter page, where he scored 28 points before and then 120 points after, so 92 points difference, which is why he's at the top there. Um, yeah, it's cool. It's interesting, and it took a while to develop. That's basically it, anyway. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Hope it hope my presentation skills weren't too bad. I know it was a bit rusty. I've tried to record this a couple of times already, and I'm not going to do it again, even though I made a few mistakes. So this is the final version. Um, please have a read of my article and let me know if you've got any questions or any ideas for me, because I'd definitely be keen to hear those.